Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The much anticipated first fight at heavyweight for cruiserweight king Oleksandr Usyk has been delayed. Usyk has injured himself in training, his promoter saying here on social media, this is Alexander Krasjuk, unfortunately Usyk got injured and his heavyweight debut has had to be postponed. The new date will be announced shortly, Alex get well soon, and then a bunch of emojis there. And Eddie Hearn, who co-promotes Oleksandr Usyk using the same picture, update due to injury at Usyk has been forced to postpone his heavyweight debut against Carlos Takam scheduled for May 25. An announcement regarding our Maryland show will be made shortly. So that show was going to feature Usyk and Takam fighting top of the bill. Filip Hrgovic was going to be on there, and I believe Michael Hunter was also going to be fighting, or was listed a number of weeks ago to be fighting on that card, and Callum Smith also due to be fighting on that date on that same card. So yeah, this obviously leaves a hole in here in that card, so we'll have to see what happens there, because that was going to be quite a bit of heavyweight action there, which would have been quite good for heavyweight fans, because honestly we haven't had much to look forward to in 2019 so far, and Usyk's debut at heavyweight was a good one to watch, even though he probably was going to put a bit of a schooling on Carlos Takam. That was my feeling on how that fight would have panned out. And if it still happens down the track, I haven't changed my position on how I feel that fight plays out. Carlos Takam is fading now. Oleksandr Usyk was going to go in there, have a good run, and look good against an opponent who's got some credibility, but is on the downslide. And ESPN, Dan Rafael, he is reporting that it was actually a torn right bicep that Oleksandr Usyk suffered. And promoter Eddie Hearn also told ESPN an announcement on the fate of the show is to come, but he hopes to keep it on. I think at this late stage, what is it, about 2.5 weeks to go, it's going to be pretty hard to cancel it with all the tickets, all that sort of thing, but yeah, we'll have to see what they can actually do there, because losing Usyk and Takam at the top of the bill, it's not great for the show, is it? But in terms of Oleksandr Usyk, this is not good news. A bicep injury, torn right bicep. Never a good injury to have, and this could set him back on the shelf for a number of months, depending actually how bad is the injury. And this is sort of where it comes to now, because if it was just a slight tear of some sort like that, then obviously he might be back in action sooner rather than later. But if it's a full-on, the whole thing is torn and it's a very bad injury, he may be out for a number of months. And you may recall Deontay Wilder actually tore his bicep against Chris Arreola back in 2016, and that was in mid-2016. He wasn't seen back in the ring until February 25th, which is about 7 or 8 months later. So depending on the nature of this injury, Usyk's debut at heavyweight may not be towards the end of the year. If it is just a small tear or something like that, and a couple of months rehab, and he can get a fight scheduled for maybe September, October, that would be the best case scenario for this sort of situation. But it does make me wonder what's going to happen now with Oleksandr Usyk, because obviously with Deontay Wilder saying that he's not going to be facing Anthony Joshua in 2019, he's got his own thing lined up, and we're hearing that it's Luis Ortiz and Adam Kovnatski. That sort of leads to the question of, well, was Usyk going to be the next opponent for Anthony Joshua if Joshua beats Ruiz Jr. on June 1st? And Joshua had said publicly he wouldn't mind facing Oleksandr Usyk next if that was the guy that was next for him. So you have to ask yourself, does that make that more a possibility, because obviously Usyk's not going to be in action now, and potentially that could end up being his first fight at heavyweight. But previously there had been some comments from Team Usyk and Usyk himself that he wanted to effectively acclimate at heavyweight, get a couple of fights under his belt before eventually facing Anthony Joshua. And he is the WBO super champion at cruiserweight, so that entitles him to become the automatic mandatory at heavyweight, so he can face Anthony Joshua when he comes up to heavyweight. So I guess there's a couple of things sort of rattling around my mind. Well, will he still take that up automatically, or because he's injured, will he end up just sort of being on the shelf, sort of holding that and sort of sticking to the plan, which would be 1 or 2 fights at heavyweight and then Joshua? So potentially this could either mean one of two things, I guess. Usyk could just step in straight at heavyweight to face Anthony Joshua coming off an injury, which I don't know would be completely ideal. or he ends up having a delayed start at heavyweight. He doesn't take the WBO mandatory because technically he hasn't stepped up to heavyweight, but he could take it later on, and that would leave the question of, well, who would be the WBO mandatory? And at the moment, the number one ranked contender is Dillian Whyte. So, I mean, there is the potential that maybe with this injury, depending on the severity, that Usyk may or may not be in the running for an Anthony Joshua fight later this year. But if he is, he would be stepping right up to heavyweight to face Joshua by the look of it. But if he's not, well, that would open the door for someone else to face Joshua, because the WBO mandatory is the next one to be called. And there had been some speculation in recent months that there would potentially be an eliminator for the WBO mandatory, but with Usyk stepping up to heavyweight, he was able to claim the mandatory spot. So if he can't do that, well, then obviously that kind of would leave the door open for someone else, and that someone else could potentially be Dillian Whyte. So, I mean, there's lots of ifs, buts, and maybes, but it really depends on the severity of the injury, but also, would Oleksandr Usyk be willing just to step up to face Anthony Joshua if push comes to shove in his first fight at heavyweight to fight Joshua for those titles, especially coming off an injury? So you have to ask that question. Or could they squeeze in a fight with Carlos Takam or someone of that ilk ahead of a fight with Joshua towards the back end of this year? Anthony Joshua's only been fighting twice a year. He's been out of the ring for the best part of, 9 months now. So, he has said he wants to be more active than he has been. But by the looks of it, it would end up probably being a December fight for his next fight. That just kind of feels like it might be. I mean, September, there's a window there, but it really sort of depends on how does he come through against Ruiz, and also the situation with mandatories. And, there's a few balls in the air here. But Oleksandr Usyk, is he in the running to just face Joshua straight off an injury? Or could it be someone else? It's a question worth asking. Drop a comment. Loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.